Hello, welcome to the video. Today I want to talk about binge eating and how I would set up fat loss or approach fat loss if you are someone that has a propensity to binge eat. Now, when I think about binge eating, the only reason binge eating occurs, or the main reason, is restriction. Like, if you didn't have restriction, then binge eating wouldn't be necessary. Because if you think that you can just eat something all the time or whenever you really feel like it, there's no need to go all out and binge. It's only when you start restricting that there's a need to binge. So it's kind of like you've got to have darkness in order to understand what light is. If there was no such thing as darkness, it would be light all the time and you wouldn't know there was a difference. So binge and restrict cycles in my head kind of work the same way. So when you approach fat loss, I think it's important to minimize restriction as much as possible to help you avoid binge eating. Because in your head, you have to minimize any reason to binge. And you have to think that this is available anytime, I can just have it whenever, so there's no need to actually binge. That's how it works for me anyway, so maybe it will help you. The thing with fat loss though is you have to restrict in some way, shape or another. Like, you have to create a calorie deficit, and that will mean restricting quantities of food, and it might even mean restricting certain foods from your diet. But if you can minimize the extent of the deficit, I think that is very helpful in terms of binge eating. Sorry about my dog. Of course he has to bark now. If you can minimize the extent of the deficit, so if you're a binge eater, basically, I wouldn't go creating a really big deficit for rapid fat loss. I would choose a more conservative, moderate deficit and start with that. See how you go, and that way you're not going to get as intense hunger signals, and I think it'll just be easier to stick to. Fat loss is going to happen more slowly, but if you can stick to it, it's going to happen. If you create a really large deficit because you want to lose fat faster, the chance of you giving into that intense hunger or binging because you feel so restricted from your lack of food, it's a lot higher the greater the deficit. So I would start with a really moderate deficit. I would also, as much as possible, avoid restricting foods altogether. Now, I would start seeing food for what it is, like protein or carb or fat, higher calories, higher nutrients, and then work out what you need to kind of eat more of and what you need to eat less of to fit your calorie requirements, because you have to be in a calorie deficit for fat loss. Like, that's all you need. You don't need special foods or anything. You don't need to avoid any foods. You might just need to reduce the quantity of certain higher calorie foods so that you reach that deficit without feeling so deprived. Like, you want to be able to maximize your food volume that you eat by choosing lower calorie foods, mostly like whole foods, vegetables, lots of protein, and then still fit in those treats. So like, still have chocolate here and there if you feel like it, and just make sure it fits that deficit. And then if you're allowed to eat treats every day, which you can, like, you can successfully lose fat and include treats in your diet as long as you stick to that calorie deficit. So if you allow yourself to have a treat of some sort every day, the chances of you sticking to your deficit and not just going crazy and binge eating when an opportunity comes up or when that food is suddenly in front of you, the chance of that happening is greatly reduced. So that is how I would approach fat loss if you are a binge eater. I would start with a very moderate deficit, except that it's going to take a bit longer, but it's probably actually going to take faster, because if you are consistent, you're going to get to your goal faster than what you are if you start something and you start with a really big deficit, but then you binge and then you go back to kind of normal because you feel like you've failed and you've given up, and then you go back to the restrict cycle again. And if you keep doing that cycle, you're just never going to get anywhere. So you're better to just stay consistent, start with a moderate deficit, and you can always increase it if you find that you are being consistent, but start with that. And then don't go restricting any foods, just work out what you need to actually minimize and what you need to eat more of in order to balance everything and hit that calorie target. So I hope this helped you. Sorry again about my dog. It is so hot here. Oh my god. I'm like trying to take this video and I can't have the windows open because then it gets too noisy, and there's no air conditioning in this room. Sorry, and even the fan is loud, so it's just like dying. But anyway, I will see you in the next video.